Hello, good morning and welcome everybody. Thank you very much for joining us on today's topic. My name's Donna Hamilton and I'm Head of Consulting at Peachy Mondays. Prior to joining Peachy Mondays, I enjoyed a variety of employee engagement and organisational development roles in a number of large global organisations. So why are we all here today? We're here to talk about getting the measure of employee wellbeing. So specifically, I want to spend some time talking about, well, what is well-being? How do we measure it? Why is it important? Why should we focus on it? What are some of the drivers of well-being in your organisation? And most importantly, what can we do to take action to improve well-being in the workplace? I'm delighted that I'm joined by our friends Abby and Jane also today, from Dundee and Angus College. And they're going to be sharing their practical experiences of using employee feedback to develop their wellbeing propositions. So first of all, a little brief introduction to Peachy Mondays. Who are we? Well, as our name suggests, we are dedicated to creating happy workplaces. We believe that happy people work better. Our employee feedback solutions enable our clients to understand employee issues and most importantly, to be able to take action on them and understand why employees feel the way that they do. I'm proud to say that we're headquartered here in Scotland, but we have a growing client list and we currently have client feedback solutions live in over 60 countries around the world. And we're currently in 12 languages. Our growing list of clients trust us to deliver a variety of feedback solutions, from annual surveys to pulse surveys to anytime feedback so that employees don't have to wait for a survey to tell us how they're feeling. We focus on well-being, but we also focus on culture, engagement, diversity, and onboard and exit surveys. So that's a little introduction to us and where we're coming from in terms of our presentation today. So what do we mean by well-being? Well, when I was first introduced to the topic, I was overwhelmed by the variety of well-being topics that were out there. So a broad array of all aspects of well-being. But we tend to find that the areas of well-being that our clients are most focused on are mental well-being, social well-being, and physical well-being. And that's because those are the areas that the world of work and our experience of work most impacts. Some of our clients also focus on financial well-being, but again, those tend to be clients that have financial support packages in place to be able to support employees. So if we understand the areas of well-being that we want to investigate and improve, how can we measure them? It feels quite intangible. Well, we spent a lot of time breaking down those well-being categories. So for mental well-being, we find there's two key dimensions. The first is that employees feel able to work creatively, they have the freedom to work, they can enjoy what they do. And the second is that they're free from anxiety and stress. So we know that a little bit of stress is good for us. It helps us to move from our comfort zone into our learning zone. But too much stress and we have that overwhelming feeling of anxiety. Second dimension is physical well-being. And again, there's two key components here. So the first is, are employees physically capable of doing the work that they're charged with? And the second is levels of fatigue, levels of energy. And is the work environment physically comfortable? And finally, our relationships at work. We tend not to work in vacuums. The relationships that we have at work, good or bad, are an important driver of well-being. So we asked all of the conference delegates if they'd be kind enough to participate in a short well-being survey for us. And I'm delighted that almost 2/3 of you did. So thank you very much if you took the time out of your busy days to do that for us. So how are we feeling? What did the results tell us? Well, at a headline level, the news looks quite good. The vast majority of us are happy at work. We feel positive and satisfied. And again, at a headline level, our well-being is generally positive. We feel good. But if we start to break the results down a little bit further based on what you told us, there are some differences. So our lowest scoring category was our feelings of mental well-being, and that was largely driven by feelings of anxiety and stress in the workplace. Almost half of us reported that that's how we felt sometimes at work. Physical well-being, again, the vast majority of us felt physically able to do the jobs that we do, but many of us reported having feelings of fatigue or a lack of energy in the workplace. And finally, thankfully, most of us have positive, supported relationships at work and feel valued. We're going to explore those results in a little bit more detail later, but I want to pause for a moment to talk about why well-being is important. So I'm guessing because you're here today, you believe in well-being, you believe that it's important. And at a basic human level, it's just the right thing to do to create happy workplaces. But what if we have to persuade the more cynical at work? What if we have to secure budget for well-being initiatives? What's the business case? Well, first of all, we can focus on how we can reduce the costs associated with poor levels of well-being. So we know that the annual cost of absence in the UK is 100 billion. We know that absence through mental health issues costs the economy over £8 billion. Interestingly, we quite often focus on the costs of absence, but actually presenteeism, so individuals coming to work when they're not fit to do so or spending longer and longer working hours in the organisation, costs twice as much as absenteeism. In a recent survey, 72% of staff said that they'd come to work when they weren't well enough to do so. Over half of those had contagious diseases, colds and flus and germs that they were spreading around the workplace. And a big factor in their decision to come to work was a feeling of job insecurity, a feeling of pressure that there would be consequences if they didn't come to work. So we know if we can take action on those well-being issues, if we can improve well-being, we can save some money in terms of the cost of absence and presenteeism. The good news is we also know that organisations that focus on well-being outperform those that don't. A review of the FTSE 100 shows that organisations that proactively publish data and initiatives on employee well-being outperform those that don't by 10%. So there's a business case to focus on well-being. And finally, you're in good company. The vast majority of medium and large organisations these days are having conversations about health and well-being at board level, and almost half of those feel that well-being is a strategic priority. So we've talked about our definition of well-being, we've talked about why it's important. I want to dig a little deeper. So if at a headline level we know that our well-being measures are X, is that good? Why is that? What can we do to improve levels of well-being? And to know that, we need to understand what's driving well-being in our organisation. So there are broadly three inputs that impact well-being in the workplace: the work setting itself, the attributes of the workforce, and how we experience work. So for the first of those, work setting, it's clear that some work areas are more hazardous. They have more health and safety risks than others. So roles that are particularly physical involve manual lifting, roles where employees are exposed to potential trauma, such as the emergency services. Areas and workplaces that are more risky and dangerous might have higher drivers of well-being issues. But interestingly, the attributes of our workforce can also impact well-being. So how healthy is the workforce? What are their lifestyle habits? How often do they take exercise? How well do they sleep? What's their diet like? Are there problems with addiction? Equally, we know that different personality types can tolerate different levels of stress. So for example, the classic type A personality, somebody that's very achievement-driven, very competitive, is more likely to have mental health issues than alternative personality types. And finally, and this is the area that we at Peachy Mondays are really interested in, is how we experience work can profoundly impact how we feel about the workplace. So collectively, we term these drivers of workplace well-being. So these are all inputs that will result in well-being outcomes or measures, which in turn will have impacts on individuals, how they feel at work and their broader personal life, and again, organisational performance. So I want to break down some of those drivers of workplace in a little bit more detail. So we have a top 9 set of drivers. I really wish that it was a top 10 and I could have played some Top of the Pops music for you. But alas, to date, we've discovered 9 are the most important. So in no particular order, and you will notice that very many of these overlap with employee engagement, which we talked about earlier today at the conference. But autonomy, the extent to which individuals are able to influence how and when they perform their role, really important driver of well-being. Influence, feeling listened to, feeling that you can influence the decisions that impact you, really important. Purpose, feeling connected to the purpose of the organisation, understanding how your role makes a contribution. Again, really positive impact on well-being. The relationships that we have with colleagues, and in particular our line manager, again, very important drivers of well-being. Let's move over now to feelings of learning, development, mastery. So being able to come to work every day and spending most of the time at work doing things that we love and that we're good at is a really important driver of well-being. So I know myself, I love working with clients, I love coming to things like this, but having to do spreadsheets, having to do invoices, not really my strong suit. Opportunities to learn and grow. So mastery, becoming really good at something, being able to learn new things, being able to go on and grow your career, have greater responsibility, do different roles, very important. We're going to come on now to the Goldilocks driver. So this is workload, time pressure. So it's very stressful if we have too much work to do and not enough time to do it. It's very stressful if we're in that horrible place where we're reactive all the time. Equally, if we don't have enough work to do and we're bored, it can also be stressful. And then finally, job security. It's an interesting one, this, that the presence of job security doesn't seem to positively impact feelings of well-being, but the absence of it certainly has a negative impact on how we experience work. Now, I very deliberately haven't ranked these because we know that all of our clients are different. All of our clients will have a different signature. So our clients that have big retail workforces, clients that tend to be customer-facing, working in call centres, drivers around the quality of their work relationships, the relationships with their managers tend to be the most important. When we're working with professional services firms, legal firms, financial firms, autonomy and influence tend to be the drivers that most influence well-being. Equally, technical, creative roles, it tends to be able to use your strengths. It's about being able to learn and grow. So it's really important not to generalise about well-being. It's really important to be able to understand what are the driving factors of your workforce and how can you best act upon them to make a difference. Now, again, we had a look at the survey results from this audience, so you might be interested to know what are the areas that are most of interest to you. So autonomy, having some control over what we do and when and how. Purpose, feeling connected to something bigger, understanding how our role makes a difference. And opportunities to learn and grow were all the strongest correlating drivers for this audience. So if you're experiencing issues with feelings of well-being at work, you might want to explore how you could improve some of those areas in your life. So we know what well-being is, we know why it's important, we're starting to understand a little bit more about what might drive well-being in our organisation. What can we do about it? Well, we at Peachy Mondays believe that managers are a really important part of the solution. So it's important to engage managers on well-being issues. So educate managers, make sure they understand what well-being is, why it's important, the role that they have to play in improving well-being. Managers have one-to-ones with staff all the time, certainly focusing on task performance and work. Good managers will also have a conversation about development and potential. We'd love to see more managers just asking colleagues, how are you doing? How are you feeling? How's it going? And finally, the more information and data we can give to managers to empower them to improve well-being, the better. We really want to democratise the sharing of information. So here's an example of a dashboard that we can use with our clients. So every line manager that had a large enough team will be able to get data about what well-being levels look like in their team, how they compare with the past. They'll be able to understand what are the strongest drivers of well-being in their organisation. So as an example, we know line managers are busy, so if we can tell them, if you do one thing, do this, it really makes a difference. Equally, we don't expect line managers to be well-being experts. They're not organisational development specialists. So when we're asking them to focus on a particular area, we'll give them some prompts to give them some tangible actions, ideas that they can do to improve well-being. So that's just an example of a dashboard, but you can use your own data to share with managers as well. So again, focusing on wellbeing solutions, taking actions. The vast majority of employees feel that they have a joint responsibility together with employers to focus on employee wellbeing. And yet there are significant numbers of employees who don't engage with the wellbeing programs and initiatives that are there for them. Some of them cite a lack of time. For others, it's because they're just simply not aware that it's there. Others would like to be more involved in the wellbeing solutions that are available to them. So again, based on our experience, here are some of the principles that we found to drive up employee participation and engagement with health and wellbeing programs. So number one, make sure that as well as it being passively stored somewhere, the information about your health and wellbeing program is proactively offered to staff at point of need. So as an example, if you're going through restructuring and employees are at risk of redundancy, very clearly signposting the support that's available. If a line manager is about to have a difficult conversation with a member of staff about performance or absence, again, making sure that that's clearly signposted. I know of one client that has their wellbeing solutions advertised on the back of toilet cubicles because they know that's where colleagues quite often go when they feel under stress, under pressure. So make sure it's there when employees need it. Also remember, it needs to be easy to access. We don't all have digital workforces, so just having it buried on the intranet isn't necessarily going to reach everybody. Having it available in different formats in terms of cards and so on, really helpful. And remember too that often employees will go off sick and be at home before they need to access the services. So make sure that they know how to do that. And finally, ask them. Ask employees what would improve their well-being. And again, we asked you as survey participants what would improve your workplace well-being. The overwhelming majority of you said, we've got too much work to do, not enough time to do it, and we're reactive. Other feedback about there being a lack of clarity about organisational priorities. For some of you, it was about the relationships. For some of you, line manager issues. So we went through all of your data, we've tagged it, we've prioritised it. My personal favourite was that one respondent thought that offering free massages to all employees would make a big difference to employee wellbeing. Just one word of caution on this, though. I talked about correlation. So we did ask in the survey a question about work-life balance and the amount of work that you had. So participants have told us that that was the most important thing, the one thing that was helped to improve their well-being at work, and yet it had the weakest correlation in the driver analysis that we did. So there's space validity in certainly involving employees and asking them what they would like to be done and to communicating the progress, but make sure that you also understand what are the drivers of well-being in your organisation. Otherwise, you could be spending precious time and resources focusing on the wrong things. So, we've defined well-being, we've talked about how to measure it, we've looked at the business case for well-being, we've explored a little bit more detail about how you can understand the drivers of well-being in your workplace and begun to have a conversation about how we take action. I'm now going to hand over to Abby, who's going to give you a practical example of how Dundee and Angus College are using employee feedback to shape their well-being proposition and improve well-being. Thank you, Abby.
Hi everyone, I'm Abby from Dundee and Angus College. This is my colleague Jane, and we work in the people team at Dundee and Angus. We have about 1,100 staff headcount, and that equates to about 615, 620 FTE. So further education college, we have a range of clients. We obviously have a large staff body, we've got academic and sports staff, and we run a range of courses, essentially open to the public, as it were, but a lot of vocational education, as you might imagine. So what we'd like to do is talk to you a little bit more about how we've actually used Peachy Mondays in practice and our Peachy wellbeing journey at Dundee and Angus. So hopefully there'll be time for questions at the end. If there's anything that you want to know a little more about, we'll try and stick to the headlines and keep you on time for your next session. So back in 2013, colleges went through a process of regionalisation, which was a Scottish Government move to bring us to be regional colleges, essentially. So that meant that Angus College and Dundee College merged. And we were two very different but very successful colleges, one more community and rural focused and one a city college. But in the sector, we were considered a good merge because we felt that quickly off the mark, we were able to harmonise terms and conditions. We had appointment of the new leadership structure quite early, so that really helped us on that journey. By the time we got to 2015, the college board was looking at how do we know that we're doing well? How do we know the merge went okay? And how do we know where we're going next? So they were really keen to have an engagement survey and to do it annually. We were a wee bit sceptical about this because of some of the measures or some of the exercises can be a little bit tick boxed. And we didn't just want to have a survey that we went, oh, that's really nice, that's great. Okay, we've got some measures now, the board's happy. So normal platforms, something like SurveyMonkey, we thought, we're not really sure if that's right for what we'd like to do. We'd actually really like to have a useful data set and a way of contacting employees. We didn't want to end up with one report and do nothing else with it. So for us, Peachy Monday seemed like an obvious solution and the right platform for it. The first survey was done towards the end of the year in 2015, and the results were really good. We were very pleased with this, but we were quite hard on ourselves, and we decided that to be safe, we should consider all neutral responses towards the negative end because we didn't want to make assumptions about where those sat, and that way we were being worst case scenarios, and anything from there we could improve on. Our happiness index from that survey was 70. Our engagement index was 68, and again, we were really pleased with this. So if you're looking at something over 75, you're looking at a highly engaged workplace. We felt we were pretty close for an organisation in the public sector that had gone through a lot of change and through this sort of identity crisis of a merge. This was actually really good news for us, so we were really happy with these headlines. As I said, worst case scenario is, so we looked at our worst scoring questions, if you like, and there were two statements that stuck out because they were 50-50 responses, 50% positive, 50% towards the negative or neutral. So they were, in general, I receive feedback that helps me do my job better, and I believe Dundee and Angus College cares about my well-being. So with a normal survey tool, great, we know that's our low score. What would you do next with that other than report it to the board and possibly follow up with the teams that you could see the scores were slightly different? But because we were using Peachy Mondays, it was the time to start the conversations. We were surprised about some of the responses, so we were able to use the anonymous conversation facility to ask people, what does that mean? So we focused on those two statements, and we focused on the sort of polar opposites of the strongly agrees and the strongly disagrees to see if we could get any themes to understand what was happening. And essentially, they gave us the answers around well-being, that these two things are connected. Feedback is part of well-being. It helps you with role clarity. It helps you with relationship building. Helps you know where you stand. It's recognition, and that impacts well-being. We also discovered there's lots of different definitions of well-being, and actually at an individual level, people were answering that question very differently based on what they perceived well-being to be. And some people answered it based on the fact, why should you care about my well-being? You're just my employer. I have to deal with my well-being. Other people saying, you make my life so difficult. So what we found was, when some people answered the survey, they were having a bad day. And they said as much when they responded to us in a conversation. They said, you know what, I can't even remember me putting that. If I answered it today, I'd feel much better about it. But equally, some people said, blimey, did I say that? No, I'm always stressed. I hate this. I was having a really good day. we wouldn't have known that otherwise, and it gives you that sort of pragmatism to those results. You catch somebody in one moment when they're answering that survey, and without that conversation, you don't really know you've done that. So, like we were saying, feedback and wellbeing were clearly linked to us around the clarity of role. But for those who answered positively around wellbeing, they said almost unilaterally it's because they were in charge of it. So they either had the autonomy, they had made the decision to be in charge of their wellbeing, they looked out for their work-life balance, they knew what their triggers were. And those who answered negatively, almost, again, blanket response, it's someone else's fault. The principal asked me to do this. My manager says that. The Scottish Government drivers are not possible for us. The PI targets are too high. And there was really very low recognition that there were individual steps that you could take to manage that situation. So I'm going to hand over to Jane to talk a wee bit about the actions that we took following that first survey.
Okay, so one of the first actions we agreed on was to set up a specific staff group just looking at wellbeing. We hadn't had this resource before, so this group involved representation from across the college. So we had lecturers, support staff, senior leadership team, which I think was a key contribution because it kind of gave the real importance of what wellbeing meant in the workplace. The purpose of the group was really just to kind of, on the back of the feedback we received from Peachy Mondays about people thinking the organisation didn't care about their wellbeing, was really to kind of take that on board and come up with some actions around it. So we're really just kind of looking to organise and promote a whole range of wellbeing opportunities within the workplace. Very much we had an operational focus, but we did have that senior leadership team dimension to it as well. We met every sort of 8 weeks and we did very practical things. One of the key successes I would say that's come from this group was we decided to have a health fair. Now, in the colleges, the way we work is the students come in for sort of 36 to 40 weeks of the year, and all our lecturing staff are kind of focused on teaching these students, getting their qualification, and then we have sort of 4 weeks, not quite downtime, once the students go. So we decided to use this key time of the year to put on a health fair. So we looked at all aspects of wellbeing, like Donna alluded to. So in terms of mental wellbeing, we put on things like mental health first aid training, mental health awareness, mindfulness training, RAP training. I don't know if you're aware of what that is. It's wellness, recovery and action planning. And it is about taking individual responsibility for your own wellbeing. We look at physical wellbeing, so the kind of things we'd offer in our fair are things like MetaFit, walking challenges, trampolining. We'd get our cycle scheme provider in. We do offer free massage, so anyone that wants to come and work for us, you do get a free massage. We also started a new thing with a university close by to us, where we have this varsity challenge, where we compete staff against staff and things like football, netball, and there's a trophy to lift up at the end of the day. So that was quite a popular initiative as well. Not forgetting about our social and emotional wellbeing. So we looked at things like, one of the key drivers that Donna talked about was the ability to kind of learn and develop more. So we have a massive CPD calendar going on at the same time called the Lead and Learn Academy. We have a group called Social at DNA. We're a much bigger organisation since merger. We've got 1,000 staff working across 3 different campuses. Some of the feedback we got is, we miss that sense of community. We don't have the same relationships anymore. So Social at DNA are a group that organise barbecues, Christmas nights out, quiz nights, charity fundraisers. And again, the feedback we get from doing these events is really, really positive. We would look to bring in financial advisors to give advice on pension, pre-retirement, the opportunity to make a will, all that kind of stuff as well. So we really are kind of looking at wellbeing in its widest sense. Another success that we've had from this group is we realised a lot of our staff had caring responsibilities. We know that the population is getting older and a lot of us are finding ourselves with caring responsibilities, sometimes holding a full-time job, sometimes with parental responsibilities as well. It can be a real juggling act. So we set up a group at the college called We Care at DNA. So this looks out for staff that come forward as carers. And also we have students that come to college as carers as well. So it's really just getting in touch with these people, reaching out to them. And the way we reach out to them would just kind of be a simple message on the portal, are you a carer? That seems, that hooks people in that are. We've held focus groups, and the key things that we heard from them was just they want to know that the employer supports them and understands their role. They're not necessarily looking for that much from us other than just really an understanding. But the real value that's come from this group is that those people we know with these common care responsibilities can get together and share how they're feeling, and share sort of good practice about getting funding for carers and help and support. And we've been able to bring some of those organisations into the workplace because time, as we know, is a big factor. So if we can bring carer organisations into the workplace rather than having to find time to go out there, that's been a real help as well.
Okay, so it sounds like a lot, doesn't it? There's a lot of stuff going on. A lot of it came from individual level feedback through the surveys. A lot of it came from the broad strokes information we got from the survey. So we went into 2016 where the board was still looking for that sort of annual benchmarking survey, and we thought, we're looking forward to seeing what impact this has had. We used the same questions as the year before because we wanted to start building that benchmark. We had a few changes to curriculum teams, which sometimes happens, so they were slightly off for some areas, but we were able to sort of relate them back to the discrete curricular groups from the year before. We were using the same platform. We decided to add in a scale for our values, so we had an index on each of the 5 college values, and well, we had pretty high expectations, and our happiness index went down 2 points. So we managed to maintain the engagement index at 68, but the happiness index is now also at 68. So I think that goes to show, for us certainly, wellbeing is so broad, it's so big, and it's not a quick fix type thing. There are so many factors that influence it. For us, from Scottish Government, from our funders, Scottish Funding Council, all these drivers come together in quite a complex way, right down to individual level where people are sitting with things around them that aren't quite right. Maybe it's relationships, it's access to the people that they need to see, etc. And indeed, the same question stood out as a 50-50 score. Now, if I was being positive, I'd be saying it's not gone down. It's still 50-50, so that's good. We've managed to maintain that. But again, we're thinking, okay, what more and what differently can we do that might actually start tackling this question, because we have a lot of useful data. So I'll hand back to Jane again just about the next few actions that we've taken following on from our, I wouldn't say disappointing, just useful and educational results from the second time around.
Okay, so what are we going to do next? We decided that what we really want to do was kind of maybe take a bit of a more planned and structured approach to the wellbeing in the workplace. So we decided to sort of write down our aims and ambitions in a wellbeing strategy. Just out of interest, how many here have got wellbeing strategies at their work? Okay, so 1 or 2, but it's definitely in the minority. For me, it was a bit of a chicken and egg thing. Do we take the time to kind of plan out what we want to do, or should we be kind of focusing more on the action? What comes first, what's most important? We've got our strategy. The group pulled it together in conjunction with our unions, but we haven't done a big launch on it. To me, it's more about the kind of actions and things we're doing. It's good to have this, to pin it on. Some of the managers like to know this is the reason why we're doing it. We've got a wellbeing strategy. But for me, it's more about what we're actually doing on the groundwork and a lot of the action that we're doing. So our strategy is a very brief kind of 2-page document. Happy to share it with anyone that's interested. Our details are at the end of the presentation. But really, it just sets out our ambition, which is really about trying to change the culture of the organisation where everyone genuinely values the benefit of good wellbeing and how that can impact not only on our work life, but on our personal life as well. And we really just kind of want to improve the quality of everyone's, that sounds like a big ambition, improve the quality of the work life and life at home as well. What we're looking at this year is a much bigger beast. So 2018, we're looking at a big college-wide initiative. So, as you know, we've got over 1,000 staff, but we've also got our students as well, who are our main customer. So the Wellbeing project and our focus in 2018 is both about staff and students. We've got, moving ahead, we've got some protected time for staff, which I think is going to be really key to the success of this project, because I think what we've maybe done in previous years is kind of pick it up and put it down, pick it up and put it down. The Wellbeing group makes every 8 weeks. We've got 2 members of staff seconded, so they can really give this a bit of drive and a bit of momentum. We've got an enthusiastic special interest group, which is even bigger than the staff wellbeing group, because we're looking at both staff wellbeing and learner wellbeing. You can argue you can't really have one without the other. You can't really expect us to look after our learner wellbeing if our staff wellbeing is not good. We'll continue to do our health fairs, but with a bit more of a sort of focus on, what is really working and what do you want to see more of. We're looking to create a toolkit of resources, and again, we'll use staff feedback as to what these resources should be, where they should sit, and very much keeping in mind that no one size fits all. Wellbeing is a very individual thing. We're going to take some time out to actually speak to the teams, and starting off with the data that we've got from Peachy Mondays, but really drill under to kind of the root causes and things. And you can see phase 2 of our project there, but obviously we'll evaluate at the end of phase 1, and things might change. Rushing on now because I know we're nearly out of time.
So in terms of using the Peachy Mondays tool, very recently, as part of this bigger wellbeing project, we put out a wellbeing survey to start gathering data on our baseline for wellbeing and a wellbeing index. So over a period of essentially downtime for the college, we were able to contact 135 people and get 77 responses, which for those of you that are used to putting out surveys, that kind of, over halfway, that 64% response is huge for us. We were able then to contact all respondents to ask them further questions about it. And from that, we got another 40 conversations, which are still ongoing just now. There are still people coming back with extra thoughts, some suggestions, answering queries that I've had. So you're seeing really strong engagement with a platform like this. It's very easy to use, it's very quick to deploy. But so what? What is that helping us do? We are established now a baseline of our wellbeing index, which is 74. So why is it 74 in this tenth of our population, but we're looking at a happiness index of 68 and an engagement index of 68? So that will be something interesting to take forward in terms of that overall view when we now biannually, we'll do the survey again later this year and try and leave that 2-year gap. How do these things sit together now? In terms of at an individual level, we've had invaluable insights into the little things that get people down. I've had people saying, if you could just fix the printer that is next to me, that would make my life instantly better. We've had all sorts of things there, from I need to speak to my line manager more, to there's something happening in my team, I'm really not sure, but having this conversation has given me the confidence to speak to my team leader about it, and I'm going to do that this week. To I work in an area with no natural light, and if you can get me a window, these kind of things. So it's really broad stroke stuff, but there's some quick wins in there. I can get the printer fixed. Obviously, I might not personally be able to do it, but we can cross-reference those relationships where people need to speak to one another to get some of these things done. And it's sometimes silly little things that have been bugging somebody, but they just weren't sure who to ask or when was the right time to make that the priority. It also gives us as a people team areas to focus on. And that's really important for us because we have limited resources. In the OD team, we've got 3 full-time members of staff. So for a population of over 1,000 people, we need to be really careful where we put our time, basically, to get the best from that. And certainly using a tool like Peachy Mondays allows us to talk to loads of our staff at any one time and get that kind of personal level feedback from them. So when we did this particular survey, there was one question, it's a wee bit difficult to see there, that just stuck out like a sore thumb. We had a really good response, and as I say, our index is sitting at 74. This question, this statement says, I rarely feel stressed, tense or anxious at work. And you can see there that actually over 50% of staff had a neutral or negative response to that. So the questions we've been asking are, what do you think the drivers for that are? How can we understand that? And what we're collating is college-wide themes that we can take to senior management and say, staff are telling us at the front line, these are the things that bother them. A lot of things around clarity of role, a lot of things around autonomy. So the more senior you are, the more autonomy you have, the happier you are, essentially. How do we make sure that people at the front line feel the autonomy that they need to feel? Do their managers realise they don't feel that way? These are the kind of things that we're building up into that sort of case study, that business case for senior management. It's also led us to a section of Jane's overall wellbeing work that's happening this year around activity-based working, because what we were able to piece together is there are so many themes that fall under this header of being in the right place to do your work with the right resources around you. Technology frustrates people if it doesn't work first time. Being in a noisy office when you're trying to write a big piece of work that you need a bit of headspace for. not being able to get the time to go to our Arbroath campus when you're based in Dundee to see the people you need to see. We're drawing together all these things around role clarity, digital tools, where are you working, is it the right space for you, into this activity-based working project. And it's really to empower our community to be in the right place at the right time, to be productive, to have that work-life balance, to not feel they need to race away to another campus to see someone when they could use Skype or another tool to do so. So we're really optimistic about the future, and throughout this whole project and various other things that we're doing at the moment, we are currently doing a restructure, and we use Peachy Mondays as an anonymous hotline through that. And interestingly, we didn't see a huge impact of that restructure in this. When the conversations were coming through, people would say, do you know what, I'm not sure of my team's direction at the moment. And yeah, there's that whole thing with the restructure and the job security, but that's kind of an additional. The bit I'm more worried about is where am I going to? You know, what's the direction of travel for this team, etc. So we deploy the platform in a number of ways, and it works for us in terms of invaluable feedback. Like I say, small team, trying to ask a lot of people a lot of things, we can do it in a variety of ways.